Hey Subfuries, I know that a lot of you love the Elder Scrolls Skyrim, and I've loved the series and its lore and history and secrets since Morrowind, so I thought I'd make a new series on the Elder Scrolls, explaining and exploring its mysteries and lore, starting with the history of Nirn. How was the world created? The Elder Scrolls is divided into eras, and funnily enough, Skyrim actually only takes place in the year 201 of the 4th era. But I'm taking you back to the Dawn era, named for, well, the dawn of creation. At this point, time did not exist yet, but for the sake of simplicity, the universe, otherwise known as the Orbrus, is about 6,000 years old, or at least that's as far back as the earliest historical sources date. We only know what happened here because of religious and ancient texts that often contradict one another and don't make all that much sense. Because, like a lot of the history that you can read throughout Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls, things can be embellished, forgotten, changed, and manipulated throughout history. But let's get started. There are dozens of pantheons and religions across Tamriel, but all Tamrielic religions begin the same. Man or Mer, things begin with the dualism of Anu and his other. So in the beginning, there was the void, nothingness. And from the void came two beings, Anu and Padme. Anu was a being that personified order and consistency, while Padme personified chaos and change. These were two equal and opposing forces. And across the different religions, they actually have different names. They were known as Anur and Faramai for the Khajiit, the Allmaker and the Adversary in Nordic religions. These two beings existed in a constant state of conflict, fighting against one another at all times. And I wanted to bring up 2 points here, because, it's quite interesting. In Redguard and Nord belief, this conflict actually results in the world being destroyed and reborn over and over again. And 2, in the Khajiit and the Anuad paraphrased, we can read about how this conflict apparently created a third being called Nirni or Nir, who gave birth to creation but died from her injuries soon after. These are just things that appear in some of the religions, but not in all of them. So we have the void, Anu and Padme. Anu then created Anuiel, the soul of everything, as well as all of creation. Padme also created a soul, which became known as Sithis, representing the void. Sithis is essentially the boss of the Dark Brotherhood, and also, funnily enough, the Argonians, who tend to not believe a lot of this creation story, do acknowledge Sithis. So, we have the void, Anu, Padme and their souls, Anuiel and Sithis. Now creation really starts to kick into play. Essentially, Anuiel's existence created the universe, known as the Orbrus, but it was chaotic and it was a mess and it made no sense at all. Things were really chaotic in the early universe, so Anuiel, like Anu before him, made himself a soul, called Auriel by most Mer and Akatosh by most men. This being created time and gave order to the universe. And you can read about that in The Heart of the World. At first, the Orbrus was turbulent and confusing, and Anuiel's ruminations went on without design. So, what did Anuiel do? Well, it tells us that he created Auriel, the soul of his soul, and Auriel bled through the Orbrus, a new force called time. So what do we have? Anuiel created Auriel, and boom, time existed. This guy, Auriel, is also the chief of the gods, the divines, in most religions across time. Elduin, Akatosh, and Auriel, and I'll try to keep this as simple as possible, are sort of the same being. They're shards or aspects of a single god, constantly fighting to try and make sure that time keeps happening. Pretty big task, right? Think of it like a multiple personality disorder, except you're all in different bodies at the same time, thinking about the same thing, trying to do the same thing. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So we have a universe, and it's finally beginning to make sense because time. And for some reason, from these two beings sprung the Daedra, or the original spirits. There isn't really a consensus on why the Daedra just sort of popped up. Yeah, they develop, but they did. And the monomyth denotes that it was Akatosh, whose formation made it easier for other spirits to structure themselves. Gods and demons form and reform and procreate. So interestingly, gods can procreate, but they just choose not to unless they have to. The Daedra, these original spirits, were made up of the Daedra and the Daedra. Now there are two explanations for how the Daedra and the Daedra became separated and different beings. Number one, the Daedra who participated in the creation became Daedra, while the Daedra who did not participate in creation became Daedra. Malakath and Lorkhan are actually both good exceptions to this. Or number two, the Anuad paraphrase explains that in Anu and Padme's fighting, the blood of Padme became the Daedra, and the blood of Anu became the stars. The mingled blood of both became the Daedra, hence their capacity for good and evil, and their greater affinity for earthly affairs than the Daedra, who have no connection to creation. Not all of the Daedra are evil, however, like Meridia, the Daedric Prince of Life, and Azura of Dawn and Dusk. However, in both of these ideas, we see that Daedra have a distinct connection to creation, while the Daedra don't. Within the universe, the realms of oblivion for the Daedra and Aetherius began to form. Because, they needed somewhere to live, they needed some 5-star accommodation. So we have the universe, time, the Daedra, oblivion, and Aetherius. Next up, Lorkhan. Generally speaking, the elves believe that Sithis sent Lorkhan to destroy creation and all of the Daedra, while men tend to point out that he was almost single-handedly responsible for the creation of Mundus, the mortal realm, i.e. all of Tamriel and everything with it. Either way, he persuaded a number of the Daedra to help him create a soul for the universe, like others had created souls. Most importantly, Anuiel and, Akatosh, they agreed to help Lorkhan because he promised Anuiel that he would be king of all of it. Magnus also joined and was appointed the architect of the mortal realm, and so he goes off and begins designing it. But the problem is, and the Daedra only actually realized this later, creating Mundus meant that the Daedra, these original spirits, had to give up some of their power, making them a lot weaker. Whether or not this was part of Lorkhan and Sithis' plan is up for debate. Then a number of things happen. 1. The Daedra, generally, refused any part in creation and buggered off to do their own thing. Number 2. In the Mer myth of Lorkhan, it was explained, as their aspects began to die off, many of the Daedra vanished completely. So, a great number of the Daedra actually died from creating Mundus. 3. Some escaped, like Magnus. So Magnus was one of the Daedra who was first to realize what was happening and escaped to Aetherius, allegedly creating the sun and providing the world with magic. Number 4. Others, like Ymphra, transformed themselves into the Elnifei, the Earthbones, so that the whole world might not die. Essentially, some Daedra, though we actually only know of one, Ymphra, an important divine to the Bosmer, the Wood Elves, gave themselves up to stabilize the laws of nature in Mundus. So this was so things could grow and live and thrive. 5. The remaining Daedra, who did not escape, went on to become who would we all know as the 8 Divines. And no, Talos is not a thing yet. But perhaps the most important outcome of Lorkhan's plan was that, and I quote, some Daedra had to marry and make children just to last. Each generation was weaker than the one before them, and soon they became the Aldmer. In other words, some of those original spirits who lost their divinity in the creation of Mundus became mortals, otherwise known as the Elnifei, who would go on to become the men and the Mer of the world. Though, supposedly, the men were only created from the weak Aldmer, corrupted by Lorkhan. you can understand why they would be pretty annoyed with the whole Lorcan guy. He took away their godhood. But on the other hand, he also created Mundus and men. It wouldn't have happened without him. Eventually, Lorcan is punished by the other divines, though different sources differ on what happened to him. Some say his heart was shot into the ocean by Auriel, and because it was so powerful, Morrowind sprung up around it. Apparently, no one was meant to find it. Vivek. His body was also torn in two, and those two halves became the two moons that the Khajiit just can't seem to get enough of, Massa and Secunda. Each of the divines then created their own planet within Mundus, which you can see in the sky. So those are the, Daedra realms. But there you go. We have a universe, time, Mundus, the laws of nature, the 8 divines, and men and Myr. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you have any other questions about the Elder Scrolls, history, or lore, let me know down in the comments below. Also, did you like this format of video subseries? It'd be really helpful for me to know. Love you guys. In the meantime, follow me on Twitter, Wattpad, Facebook, feel free to email me or send me art that you've made in the links in the description below. Stay nerdy, Subfuries, and I'll see you in the future.